Thank you so much. I'm so touched.
It is on, okay. Whew. Wow. Well, one of the first questions I have for you is, you've made some films about dramatic nature, and I wondered how you got drawn to that, or what kind of sparked that, or what was your path about in that?
Oh, I love that question. No, I'll try to make it concise because I feel like I could spend a lifetime perhaps answering
Right.
that. I think actually growing up here in the Bay Area, I feel very lucky to have had parents who took me to Tilden Park, to Point Reyes, to just the majestic wilderness that we have here. And I think from a very young age, I just felt the power of nature. And the older I get, the more I feel like I can viscerally feel that power. That's also turned into a feeling of sentience. And at this moment that we're in with the climate crisis, I feel like any kind of story that can teach us just the intelligence of more than human nature, and I use that expression more than human nature because we are, of course, nature too. I think it's almost an act of rebellion against these narratives that cast, nature as a resource to extract, as a wasteland to develop. So I'll just say it deeply inspires me, and I think that started from a love of growing up here in the Bay. And that's something that I felt so powerfully being in Iceland, where the winds just can knock you over, and the oceans really do feel like they're so powerful. They must be full of sea monsters. So I feel profoundly lucky to get to kind of, I feel like, collaborate with nature in the films that I make.
Well, I certainly remember as a kid feeling the visceral connection, even though one time I remember being in Kentucky, in Appalachia, living with mountains, beautiful green, and I just thought it was so beautiful, And then we went to this airstrip that was being built, and I just felt in my gut, something's not right here. They cut down these trees. The land was all dirt, and I just have wondered. How can people not feel that? How can they go into a forest and just whack the trees down and take them away as logs? Of course, we're beneficiaries of having, wooden houses or whatever, but it's so clear in this film how connected the people are to the land and the feeling that they have for the land and the glaciers, and that it's part of their identity. They're totally connected with it.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Something that Andre often said when we were making this film was that Iceland is encoded with an invisible layer of stories. And that's something that we really tried to communicate in representing the glaciers, both through our cinematography as well as the storytelling around the glaciers themselves. But there's something about that when we can map memory onto landscapes that might feel inert to someone who already doesn't have a relationship into it. I do think that there's a powerful invitation to kind of feel a kind of kinship with nature. So it might transform someone who might, in your story of seeing a dirt path, someone might not feel anything, but if they understand kind of the layers of history that have been there, how the forest had been entangled with other nature, perhaps it might shift their gaze a little bit. And I'll just say that she's not in this film, but a film I made in Iceland years before this film, actually it was where I first met Andre, was this film called The Seer and the Unseen. And it's the story of an Icelandic woman who's in communication with elves and trolls and huldafolk, or the hidden people. And she says in that film, the way you see the land determines your relationship to the land. And that sentence, I think, really guided our approach in this film, and I hope is perhaps an offering to all of us to think about what we see and how we see, and how our actions come forth from that.
So I guess one thing that it seems like you're doing in this film, and Andre's trying to get across, is because of we as humans have a finite time on this earth, but we feel all the different, if we're lucky enough to last, long enough to get into being older, we go through all these feelings about the different ages that we pass through, that we share with other people, that we see, our grandparents, or we see our baby nieces or whatever. And so it feels like part of what the film does is knowing how we feel about those relationships and our finite relationship with time, we can theoretically transfer that to geological time, if we really think about it. And geological time is fascinating and so important for us to get a grasp on. It seems like that's part of what you're trying to do in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so beautifully put. That was, I think, one of our highest intentions of the film was to communicate the expansive geologic time, which is so hard to do if you think of us as our own single individual lives. But as Andre says, if you can reach out in this handshake of generations, then you can understand the expanse, how you're connected to the past, how you could be connected to the future and thus impact the future. And I think that also instills kind of a power and a precarity of the present moment in a way that invites participation, which I think is so important right now, that we participate in the writing of a more habitable future. So I love how Andre articulates that. And we were so blessed to get to work with his family's trove of archives, and through the archives themselves, they were encoded with his family's memories, and tremendously incomplete, as all archives are. But what was there was so meaningful for us to get to weave together in order to express these ideas.
Yeah, it seems as if there are people right now that are starting to really sort of delve into it so much more, like Michael Pollan and plants, and also the people talking about the slow time of trees and the sentience of the trees and the sentience of the plants, and that it's hard for us to sort of grasp, but it's just the different time frames that our fellow creatures and flora and fauna have. There's animals that have a very short lifetime, like 7 days or something, and then there's others that have millennia. And wow, it's so amazing to think about just the way that this universe is sort of, and our planet, the story of our planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fascinated with exactly that. I have a giant, I can feel my face, like my smile is so big because I'm absolutely in awe of exactly what you said. One of the things I think geologic time, as expressed in the sentience of plants or trees or animals, can really do too is show us our own fragility. We're just a tiny snapshot against the life of a redwood or the life of a glacier, and it humbles us. And at once, in this moment of the climate crisis, it also shows us just how powerful we also are, because humans have become a geologic force. Like, the amount of carbon we output every single day is greater than, I think it's 666 volcanic eruptions around the clock. That's actually something Andre writes about in his book that loosely inspired this film. So all to say, we are on par with the force of something as powerful as a volcano, and that's absolutely devastating. So when you have this flip of understanding just how small we are, and yet in our smallness, we are indelibly, radically breaking the systems of time and water that have balanced our world prior to us, then I think it forces a sense of urgency. It's like in this great expanse, there's also this moment, and what are we going to do about that?
Yeah, well, just the way that you end the film, and it is a call to action, but it's put in a very poetic way. It's not like hitting you over the head, but it's like saying, "Ooh, yeah, maybe we ought to do something." And we need all these different kinds of messaging for all the different issues that we have going on in the world right now.
Yeah, I really believe that. I feel like our film is in conversation with the tremendous body of climate films that have come before us and are continuing to be made that explain perhaps more clearly of how we got here and why, and the science behind it and what is happening. So I feel like we're in conversation with that. In the making of this film, we wanted to do something deeply personal that could, through a very intimate story of one person, one family, one country, kind of invite all of you to reflect on your own family relationships, how you're embedded within landscapes that create home, what it might feel like for you to lose your own sense of home, and what does that provoke in you. This isn't a film that asks for kind of any sense of prescriptive action to take, but I hope will invite a sense of responsibility to your fellow humans and landscape. And of course, I should also say we're about to create an impact and education campaign that does provide more specific actions and tools to roll out on the heels of this. But for the film itself, it's really meant to invite a sense of kind of contemplation in your own way.
Yes. Well, I have more questions. I'm just wondering about our when we should get questions from the audience. If we should talk a little more first, and then. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, how about? I'm sure everybody wonders how you met up with Andre and his family and this whole scenario.
Sure. So I first met Andre in 2015 when I was making This Year in the Unseen, the last film in Iceland I made. And I should say I made that film with my producer, Shane Boris, who is right there. I'm going to embarrass him. I feel very lucky to have worked on my last 3 films with Shane, and he and our entire team. This is such a collaborative and collective process. So it's always an honor to get to work with him and our team. Back to 2015, we were making This Year in the Unseen, and that's another, again, environmental story in Iceland, and everyone said, you have to talk to Andre Snyder Magnusson. He's a leading environmentalist, he's a writer, he'll give you great insight on this story, and he did. And ever since then, I hungrily kind of read his work and tracked what he was doing, and then in 2019, he published an article entitled, How Do You Say Goodbye to a Glacier? And that article had just come out as the Ok Glacier Memorial, the funeral was held. And I just felt like that headline was such a powerful and troubling question that pulled into focus this kind of surreal feeling of loss that I think so many people are grappling with right now. When I read the article itself, it felt so cinematic. He was talking about his grandparents, how they fell in love on the glacier, but also this question of, my grandparents were some of the first people to do this pioneering thing, and now just 2 generations later, I'm having to say goodbye to what seemed like it was eternal. So I was very moved by it, and I reached out to him to talk about maybe working on a film together. Shortly after that, the world completely changed because COVID hit and we all went into lockdown, and that project got put on hold. And in the space of that time, Shane and I and my other key collaborators, we made a different film called Fire of Love, which was an archival film about 2 French volcanologists who are in love with each other and volcanoes. And since it was an all archival film, we were able to do that while under lockdown. But when that film had come out, Andre had just published his book on time and water, and he said, "Oh, you just made an archive film. It turns out this book was based on my own family archives. Do you want to check them out?" And we very eagerly, said, "Yes, we do." And that really began the process of making this film.
Well, I noticed that the cinematography, the contemporary cinematography, was so beautiful, and it looked like, for somebody that loves visual patterns and colors and imagery, they must have been in heaven trying to, decide what angles to get. And then to edit that, having this treasure trove of images, I know as an editor, I would have just been like, that must have been something. And what was it like? You briefly mentioned to me that it was pretty difficult sometimes, challenging to get some of those shots.
Yeah, it was extraordinarily challenging to shoot in Iceland on the glaciers. We were very lucky, though. We had an incredible team, largely made up of Icelanders who were kind of fluent in all things glaciers. And that was, our team was also led by our director of photography, Pablo Alvarez Mesa, who I feel like Pablo is like, he can just feel and intuit the power of water, whether it's fog or ice or rivers or rain. Like he's so somehow kind of in touch with, again, the liveness of the natural world. And I feel like he translates that directly through his cameras. It was really important to us from the beginning to kind of capture a feeling of sentience of the glaciers. Because we really felt like in order to tell a story about a glacier's death, you had to feel the power of a glacier's life. And the best way to do that was to do that not just through image, but also sound. And so we also had an incredible sound team. Our sound mixer and sound designer also came into the field with us and really was so attuned to how glaciers sound when they move, knowing that it's that movement that articulates its life. So all to say, we had this incredible crew that was so dedicated to bringing out this life force of the ice, while also finding angles and shots with 16 millimeter, with the Bolex camera, that could be in dialogue with the archives itself, because it was very important to us to have this feeling that the film was polytemporal. It was all times are within times, the past is with us, and again, we can reach the future. And so we really tried to capture that through our cinematography and sound design as well. But it was really challenging. The wind really was blowing over our tripods. There's multiple of us trying to keep Pablo from blowing over himself. It's fun to think about in the end, but it was perilous while it was happening.
So would you say that was the most challenging part of the film, or were there other parts that were just as challenging or challenging in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, it was challenging to shoot, but it was also so invigorating, and it taught us lessons about nature. It humbled us in a way that we really needed in order to make this film. But I would say the edit actually was, I think, the most challenging. It had the tremendous honor and pleasure to work with 3 incredible editors, Aaron Casper, Jocelyn Chaput, and Mark Harrison. And we had just so much archival material to go through. And then, of course, on top of that, we were collaging together our originally shot footage. But Aaron and Jocelyn and Mark they're so good at finding like the tiny details that could feel, when put in association, like subjective memory, and memory being such a key theme to the film. I'll just say they were so good at mining everything so impeccably to create a language that felt appropriately thematic. But it took a tremendous amount of time. It was always done in a dance with the narration itself, which we were collectively writing alongside Andre. So it was just a very kind of iterative process the whole way through.
Great. Well, maybe we should take some questions from the audience now.
And I will run the mic for those questions.
I guess there's somebody that's going to start.
Can you say a little bit more about how you recorded those incredible glacier sounds? There was one part in the movie where it was just this soundscape of glacier, and was that really the glacier, or and the other thing is, can you say a little bit more about those sort of ancient songs that you were playing, and whether they're available elsewhere?
Could people hear that question about this? She's asking about the sound of the glaciers. Was that real? I mean, it was so amazing and original, or different from what we imagine, I guess.
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for that. Yes, the sounds of the glacier were real. We aside from our incredible sound designer and sound mixer who came into the field with us as well, his name is Bjorn Victorson, we also had a glacial sound advisor, a scholar whose training actually is in ethnomusicology, named Konstantin Vlasis, and he just published his dissertation, or he's about to publish his dissertation, which is all about kind of the life force of glacier and and how listening to nature can invite all kinds of epistemological and dare I say, like kind of cultural learnings and even spiritual learnings. But he's a profound scholar, and his work really influenced our approach. Maureen used the word sentience, and I'm using it again here because it was so important for everyone to feel the movement of the glaciers. As Andre says in the film, it's once the ice begins to move, that's actually when it's considered a glacier and alive. And so we used very special microphones to capture that sound. We would put them down into moulins, which are like the kind of ice canyons, and to get not just the meltwater sound, but also the like very subtle groans and creaks that you can't hear really with your kind of naked ear, but the microphones could exacerbate and capture that sound. So it was thrilling for us because it did, when we were listening to it, it felt like a heartbeat. And we didn't want to make that metaphor so clear that it like felt like we're overly anthropomorphizing the glaciers, but it's still, you could feel perhaps a kinship that this is an alive entity. And your other question about the songs, those are called rímur, which, as Andre says in the film, is the Icelandic word for rhyme. And those were so inspiring for us because of how they were kind of an archival technology themselves before before recording technology existed. They really did allow people to pass down these epic stories that they're in some cases over 20 minutes long, that people historically would ride horseback through kind of the Icelandic wilderness, going from little hamlet to hamlet, like reciting these totally from memory. And they captured what life was like there, and they also entertained. There are stories of trolls and giants and elf women, and I'll just say they're quite fantastical all at once. But for us, the rhythm and the rhyme and the refrains and the rímur themselves became a kind of structuring device for us. We really wanted to imbue the film with kind of visual rhymes and rhymes in the narration throughout, as kind of a mnemonic technology, but also as a nod to kind of that cultural heritage for the film. So it was really inspiring to us on many levels. And Andre actually put out, you can find them on Spotify, but he put out a CD in 1997 that now is on Spotify, but it's called Radir, which is Raddir. So just look that up, and you can have access to a whole playlist of really beautiful Icelandic rímur.
Hey, Sarah. Can you talk about the narration and the decision to tell it from the perspective of a time capsule?
That's a great question. Thanks, Joanne. I should just say I learned so much about filmmaking from Joanne, so I'm very grateful that she's here in this audience. The decision the decision to kind of write the narration in like an epistolary letter fashion and create kind of the structure of the film as a time capsule actually came kind of midway through our process. It wasn't one of the things that we started out doing, but we really wanted to find a structure for the film that could feel like it was thematically uplifting the story as well. And this is a very kind of non-linear, unconventional narrative, and it can be challenging to follow. And so we were kind of even joking. It's like we wanted to like put the film into a container to give it a sense of shape. And I'll just say through many conversations and also trying to bring in Andre's work as a sci-fi writer, we came to this idea of like, what if this film is a time capsule? You know, the glacier is itself a time capsule, archives are a form of time capsule. So much of the film is about time travel and connection with time. So it just felt very fitting to create that as a structuring device. But we really wanted the narration to not just be Andre's first person, but for it to be a direct, intimate address, to invite a sense of intimacy. And like the future is intimate, it's not abstract, far away into the future, but it's a place where someone you love could be. And so the idea to write in that kind of you form, to say, you know, like we will never meet because we live in different times. I cannot send you a glacier, but at least I can send you this. We thought could cause you, the audience, to think maybe he's speaking to you, maybe he's speaking to the future, but we're all kind of in this together. So that was a lot of the thinking behind that. So yeah.
I also wanted to ask a question about the narration. His voice was just so beautiful, and it was such poetic language. and the questions that he posed. So, was any of that voicing that was recorded on the archival filming that he shot, and did he participate in the writing? I'm just interested in all of that.
Sure, yeah. It was a very collaborative and iterative process of writing the narration. It was done by myself, by two editors, Aaron and Jocelyn, and Andre, and then with tremendous input from Shane and our associate producer, Natalia Fuentes, as well as a handful of other collaborators. There were times when I would write something, and because it had to fit with the edit itself, and so I would then give it to my editors. They would kind of tweak it to fit with what they were working with, and they would send it back to me. I would give some notes, and then we would send it to Andre, and sometimes he'd be like, oh, this feels really like me. Sometimes he'd be like, this definitely does not feel like me. I'm going to make these adjustments here, and we'd be like, great. But it was constant kind of back and forth and a flow of things to make sure it really felt true to his experience. That meant sometimes pushing him to be more vulnerable than maybe at first came naturally to him, but he understood that his vulnerability was also an act of generosity that could allow people to feel. So I'm forever grateful for that. But it was a very constant collaborative process throughout. The recording of the narration, that's all Andre, except when you hear him behind the camera, like when he's like filming his daughters or his grandparents, that's of course him during that time. But the narration piece of it, we recorded in Andre's kind of study room in his home. We kind of turned it almost, we tried to make it feel as like homey and as intimate and natural as possible for him. So that's all him. He was pretending that me and Shane and our editor Aaron were his hypothetical great grandkids in the future, and so he was speaking directly to us, and we were trying to be that for him to get that sense of intimacy in his voice as well.
Question right here.
You spoke about the sound of the glacier. I'm curious about the smell of the glacier. The woman said she senses it in April. Is this like wine, or do glaciers have different smells? What is the smell of a glacier?
Oh, you're the first person to ask that question. That makes me so happy. I feel like Grandma Hulda would be smiling, or is smiling on her glacier in the sky somewhere. Yeah, it's a very particular scent that I only know from my times on glaciers as like this very earthy, kind of musty smell that, I associate it with springtime. But I'm not an Icelander, and so I don't have that like many years accumulated kind of feeling of like, I know in the Bay there's like a moment when the fog starts to feel different, and I notice I'm like, okay, it's gonna start to burn off now, and I only know that experience because I grew up here, and so that's maybe how I liken this smell for the glaciers. I know what it smells like to me, but I'll never know what it's like to be an Icelander when spring is coming, and to know like, okay, I'm smelling the glacier, it's springtime now. But I hope you all will get a chance. If you have never been to Iceland before and never seen a glacier in real life, I hope you'll get to smell your own glaciers.
This is such a beautiful film. Thank you for making it and sharing it with us. As I spent time staring at those glaciers, I kept thinking about Fire of Love and what a beautiful film that is. And I was wondering what it felt like knowing how long these take to make. What it felt like to spend this much time in a world of ice and blue, and what it felt like to be in a volcano for Fire of Love.
I love these questions. That's a great question. To be in the blue world of a glacier, it was truly a profound experience. Like when we were shooting there, I really felt so tiny. When you look at glacial ice, it really does feel cosmic. Like you can see all the earth and the air bubbles and the volcanic ash and little sticks and mud and all frozen. And it reminds me of like, a galaxy far away, but right here. And that just really does feel profound and humbling. And then when you see the blue, and knowing now what we learned while we were making the film, that the deeper the blue, the deeper the time, it puts me in contact with like the crystallization of time in a way that for me, time has always been so baffling and elusive. But it's like here is one representation that is actually solid, and devastatingly now it's melting. So there's something just so ineffable and humbling, but spiritual and strange and surreal all at once about it. Yeah, I think it really did reconceptualize my relationship to what it means to be human, because I felt kind of my smallness in those moments. For Fire of Love, being in the red hot volcanic world was wild in a totally different way. In some ways very similar, because again, like I'm in contact with geologic time, the creative forces of the earth, but there's something I think more electric, more fiery hot, so to speak. In the process of making that film, there's something that feels very kind of percussive about my memory of that experience. Yeah, I feel that one as like more of like kind of fast time, and this one is more like slow, deep time, but they each put me in contact with kind of both the creative and destructive forces of the earth. But there's something about the colors, like, I want to do something like maybe yellow next.
So our last audience question.
It's a lot of pressure. I wanted to ask, was there anything about the archival footage that you had, or just Andre's life, that led you away from or towards specific themes from the book, which I was also a big fan of? And was there anything in the book or other aspects of Andre's life since then that you would love to explore more?
Oh, that's a great question. There is a lot in the book that, I should back up and say Andre has a beautiful way of talking about the film in relationship to his book On Time and Water, and that he says that they both grew from the same soil, but they're different trees. That soil is his archival trove of material that starts with his grandparents and then what he tried to collect over the years. And in that archival trove, there's a lot that appears in the book, but there's also some things that don't quite appear. For example, in the book, he goes into the story of his third grandfather, Grandpa Bjorn, who is a surgeon who operated on Robert Oppenheimer, as well as the Shah of Iran. He somehow touched geopolitical history in this very concrete way, but there wasn't the visual material to necessarily support that storyline in the form of a film. So there are things like that we couldn't quite go into, even though they're wonderfully rendered in the book. But there were things like, there were moments in Andre's archive, like little asides here and there, laughter, that did change kind of our orientation to the film. One of my favorite moments in his archive is the scene where his grandfather Jon is telling the story of the elf woman who told him to marry his grandmother Disa, and then all of a sudden Grandma Disa is like, check out my pants. and Andre so dutifully moves the camera. It's like, oh yeah, they're nice pants. But he's like such a good like doting grandson, and that it made me like not just like love Grandpa Jon and this incredible story, and I love hearing the stories of Icelandic folklore in the form of elves, but it told me so much about his character, and moments like that really helped us to think about like kind of an epistolary relationship, some like a grandson to grandmother, like who is our audience? How do we imbue a sense of intimacy behind our time capsule lens to all of you? So those moments really did. They seemed so subtle, yet they were really powerful in kind of shaping how we sculpted the narrative of the film in a way that also is quite different from the book. But I really encourage you all to read Andre's book. It is very different from this film, but I'm really in awe of it. It's quite expansive. But I'm forever grateful for getting to read it.
Great. Well, I guess we're winding up. One thing I can ask you is, like, do you have a website? Do you have sort of contact information about screenings? Because you told me that you're going to be screening in Iceland, and you haven't done that yet.
Yes, yeah. So we're extremely lucky to be working with National Geographic documentary films on this film, as well as the theatrical distributors 1-2 Special. The film right now is in theaters, I think 40 theaters around the country. This is coming off of a long festival run. The website is, I should know this, timeandwater.org. timeandwater.film, is that right? timeandwaterfilm.com. Timeandwaterfilm.com. I should really know that off the top of my head, but that has the list of all the screenings. And yes, in August, we're going to have our Icelandic premiere, which we're really excited about. We're just now finalizing a version of the film with the narration in Icelandic, which feels very meaningful and moving for us.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Sara, and applause.
Thank you so much, Maureen. And thank you all so much for being here.
And for Shane over there.